One kind of archetypal hero, obviously, is someone who's physically strong. There's a great movie that you could watch about this. It's called Hitman Hart. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen, and it's about this guy named Bret Hart. And Bret Hart was, for a while, the most famous Canadian on the planet. And he was a worldwide wrestling foundation, I think. What did they call that? WWF? Yeah. He was their, like, lead good guy. And so wrestling, I loved the documentary, because when I was a little kid, like 4 or 5, I used to watch his father, whose name was Stu Hart, who ran this channel, this wrestling confederation in Alberta. And Stu Hart had, I think, 8 boys, and he trained all of them to be pro wrestlers. And part of the movie is extraordinarily funny, because Stu Hart is in it, and he's really old. He's like 85, and he's just barely, can you imagine? He was like a pro wrestler for 40 years. Like every joint is broken. And he's still big, but he's just barely moving. And this kid and another kid come over, and Stu is telling the story about how he used to take his boys into the basement and toughen them up. And I think Bret called that the journey to pain or something like that. His father would take all these kids down there and wrestle with them and push them right to the edge of their pain tolerance constantly. And anyways, they grew up tough. There's no doubt about that. And all his daughters married pro wrestlers too, and I think he had 7 daughters. So he's quite the character. Anyways, these 2 kids, they're late adolescence, early adulthood, come over, and one of them's pretty damn cocky. And he's listening to Stu, and he says something smart like, well, you know, you were pretty tough with the old days, hey? And Stu looks at him and says, well, why don't you come down to the basement with me? And he says, well, look, I don't want to hurt you, old man. And so the filmmakers follow them into the basement, eh? And like they're kind of standing there, and the old guy grabs him in a headlock and takes him like, he's like a snake, eh? He's got him in a headlock like so fast, and the kid doesn't know what to do. And then, so Stu, like, who knows how to put a headlock on someone, he's like flexing his forearm, yeah, which is like still not so bad a forearm. And he's got, this guy's face is just, he's like he's stepped in a bear trap, plus he's absolutely shocked that this old guy got him. And so he's kind of gasping. And Stu says something like, you watch, if I flex this muscle just right, you can see this vein on his forehead start to pop out. It's extraordinarily funny. Anyways, Bret Hart plays out the good guy archetype. And Bret's, like, he's a solid guy, but I would say he's not particularly sophisticated, and I'm not being cruel about that. I mean, he had a great career, and he's tough as a boot, and so good for him. But he plays out this good guy archetype, and he gets tangled up in it. And now, I don't remember your damn question, but I am trying to answer it. Tell me the question again.
So I was wondering how, in reality, you go from who's strongest and who's weakest to what's good and what isn't.
Oh yes, okay, exactly. Well, so one of the things I really liked about this movie was it showed me why people watched wrestling, and I couldn't because certainly they're not appealing, and I'm not being, there are different strata of conception of abstraction that any entertainment process has to appeal to. And you know, most people don't go to movies. And that's actually because, it really is because movies operate at a level of sophistication that is too high for many people. Just like novels. I mean, hardly anyone reads, you know, and if you, about 15% of the population, might be 20%, cannot read well enough to follow written instructions. And so, and people who are, maybe it's 15% of the population or 10%, have never finished a book, never. And so, and it is that high. But you still, the archetype still needs to manifest itself at different levels, and so it manifests itself in wrestling. But even there, where it is physical force, it's not just physical force. Like, it's a drama between good and evil. And you can see this so clearly in the Bret Hart documentary, because he's the good guy, and you know, the bad guys are really over the top bad. It's a real drama. It's like, it's good versus evil in the ring every time. And hopefully good wins, but good often gets, you know, maybe the bad wrestler brings 2 of his friends in, and they bring in chairs and they bash the hell out of the good guy, and the whole audience is just outraged by this. And the documentary does a lovely job of showing that. But so even at the level of physical combat, let's say, you can't reduce what's good to what's strong. It's just one element of it. Better to be strong than to be weak. And so you can have a strong hero because it's better to be strong than to be weak. But it's better to be strong and kind than to be strong. And it's better to be strong and kind and wise than to be strong and kind. And so, and that's true not only for human beings, but it's even true, let's say, at the wolf or the chimpanzee level, because one of the things you see with the chimp dominance hierarchies, and I think I mentioned this before, is if the leader, the dominant male, is really good at fostering social relations and being reciprocal in acts like grooming, and also paying attention to the females and their offspring, his dynasty will be much more stable. And so strong might be good for one battle, it might be good for 2 battles, but for 50 battles, it's not optimized. Especially because no matter how strong you are, someone can take you out. So what happens is the idea of what's ideal becomes increasingly complex across time, multifaceted, right? And so strength, wisdom, intelligence, vision, all these things are amalgamated into a single being.